Hello guys, Boofire191 here, and before I start this off, I want to do a quick little disclaimer. This is a fan creation about Warhammer based off of my guys, essentially a story that I've created for my mooks and my heroes. So yes, with all that said, I'm gonna get right down into it. I hope you guys enjoy. Personal Log of Dane Atani. When I was a boy, I grew up on an agricultural world on the far side of the Imperium. It was a simple life that I shared with my father, mother, and older sister. My father served in the Imperial Guard long enough to actually retire from service. He was one of the lucky few who could. He was given a small plot of land on a newly established colony where he built a farm and met my mom. My mother was a devout follower of the Imperial cult, an aspect that rubbed off on my sister. My father, on the other hand, was too jaded after decades of war. In public, he was a model citizen, but in his private moments, he presented a different picture. The only place that offered an education on my homeworld was the Imperial cult. My mother made a push to get me to go, but my father made excuses, saying he needed me to work the farm. My mother was none too pleased, but my father was happy he prevented the birth of another zealot. For years, I would plant and harvest crops, take care of animals, go hunting with my father, and at night, learn to read, write, as well as do math. My favorite part of the day was when my father would take me out into the woods with his old las rifle to hunt or just shoot some things he set up. The actual activity of hunting was fun, but the best, as well as some of the worst parts of it, were when my dad and I got to talking. Most times, his stories were about his time in the Guard, but other times, he'd talk about things I would later learn were heretical in nature. The early years of my father's time in the Guard saw him fighting the mechanized terror of the Necron. The first battle he was ever a part of, he saw everyone he trained with get torn to shreds, or melt in front of him. The trials and horrors of fighting the Necron lasted for over a decade. However, he was eventually reassigned to another part of the galaxy. This was the point where he lost his faith in everything. He wasn't fighting chaos, or the orcs, or the tyranids, or the Dark Eldar for that matter, or even more Necron. No, he was fighting the Tau. He was fighting other rational, living beings that had families. The things he did during the campaigns against the Tau left him scarred. There was one story he told where he and a fire warrior were stuck in an old mine. They were separated from their armies, and their weapons had been damaged. The decades of fighting had worn my father out. He didn't want to fight unless he was ordered to. The fire warrior, oddly enough, seemed to have been in the same boat. The two worked together to get out of the mine. They talked, and for a time my father forgot he was at war with the Tau. But when they freed themselves from the mine, several Imperial soldiers were outside the entrance. They gunned down the fire warrior and ordered my father to return to the front. It was at that point he lost all of his faith in the Emperor, in humanity. There was no reason for the fire warrior to be killed. There was no reason to be fighting the Tau. But humanity was. At that point, he vowed not to indoctrinate his kids. He may have failed with my sister due to my mom, but he didn't with me. I had my problems with my mother, and reservations with my sister, but I loved my father, and I knew he loved me. The last hunting trip the two of us took ended up having an odd turn in tone. It was my parents' anniversary, and he had a somber look. I knew better than to ask when he had that look. Usually he was thinking about the war. Talking to him in that state would often result in one-word answers. But that time was different. About a decade later, he was still fighting the Tau, and was lucky enough to still be alive, as most of his regiment was slaughtered. They were well below fighting strength at that point, so the regiment was combined with another one. He was assigned to a new squad where he met another guardsman named Veronica. The two both had uncanny luck and served together for several years. My father admitted that they fell for one another, be him looking for relief to survive the horrors of war, or actual love. The two became inseparable. On the last push against the Tau on a far-off world, my father, Veronica, and several guardsmen had to assault a position. The losses were great, but they survived. However, the Commissar ordered Veronica into a dangerous situation needlessly. My father never elaborated on this when I asked him. I could tell the memory was a burden. She tried to explain to the Commissar that what he was ordering was unnecessary. but she was interrupted with a bullet to the brain. My father lost his mind. He killed the commissar, as well as the few guardsmen who still remained at the Tau position. He went silent for a time, then told me he was shipped off to this world not long after. He was able to retire from the guard. The incident and the position was just never investigated. A few months later, he met my mother. He told me that he didn't marry her because he loved her, or even liked her. He married her because she looked exactly like Veronica. He thought he could keep her memory alive with my mother. He admitted that was a mistake. My father then dropped his lasgun and hoisted me in the air, and that was the last coherent moment I remember with him still alive. The next few moments were hell. Off in the distance, we could hear the sound of gunfire, and a sound I could only describe as a roar. My father picked up his lasgun and ran into action. I followed close behind. What we saw as we cleared the forest was a species I would later learn were called the Tyranids. The small city we lived next to was under attack. The PDF didn't stand a chance. My sister came running over to us with a small Tyranid chasing her. My father leaped into action and fired away with his lasgun. He killed the first Tyranid, then the second, then the third. That was when I saw it. From the sky, several small vessels descended upon the planet. Some of the craft opened fire on the Tyranids, while others landed, offloading several figures in worn-out white and orange armor. A craft landed near me and my sister. A figure wearing more intricate armor from the rest emerged. As the doors of the craft slid open, I was in awe of the figure. He was what I imagined my father looked like when he was in the guard. The figure raised his weapon and fired several shots over my head. I followed them as they hit their targets, and I really wish I didn't. The figure killed a Tyranid as it tore my father in half. I watched in stunned horror as my father's torso, lasgun still in hand, landed near my feet. My head was heavy. I think I could hear the figure shouting something, but it didn't matter. I picked up my father's lasgun and started to pull the trigger. Nothing came out. The figure spun me around and took the lasgun out of my hands. All I remember hearing from him was, "Don't let his sacrifice be in vain." I entered the ship alongside my sister, and we lifted off. All across the colony, fighting raged, but it didn't last long. When the vessels had their cargo, they left the world to its fate. I would later learn that the Tyranids that attacked my world weren't a hive fleet. They were simply a splinter group of a much larger horde. They were the beginning of a looming threat. Our small landing craft landed in a much larger warship that had hid itself behind the planet's moon. Not long after, we sped off to the world of Guarith, my home for many years to come. Our destination laid far beyond the edge of the Segmentum Ultima, past the Tau Empire, and beyond the arms of the galaxy. On a star chart or sensors, our destination was nothing but the cold emptiness of space, but in truth, it was home to the Keepers. I recall the warship shaking as it passed through what I would later learn was the Veil. Through the manipulation of the warp and the combined psychic power of every Eldar living in that part of space right before the fall of their empire, they were able to erect a barrier that hid them from both the forces of chaos and the wider galaxy. However, this came at a great cost. The Eldar in this part of space lost their ability to use their psychic abilities, except for an incredibly small number, who, in comparison to other psychers, were insanely weak. I myself had a hard time keeping up with the Eldar's, and in turn, Keeper's history. Most of the details are better explained by Inklord Tour. The region the Veil encompassed was small, but the Keepers were masters at terraforming. All over the solar systems, almost every world the moon, not used for mining or industry, was transformed into a habitable world. Beyond this, above the capital world of Guarith, there was 3 starships, which were almost the biggest ones I had ever seen. However, the honor of being the biggest starships I've ever seen went to the other 2 vessels, one still under construction. These 5 ships were the Arks, the reasons the Keepers had for still living. The 3 smaller ships, if you want to call them small, were built during the height of the Eldar Empire as warships. They were slightly larger than an Eldar craft world, making them an impressive vessel to behold. But the other 2, they were something else. The finished Grand Ark, as they were called, Malorn, had taken several thousand years and countless worlds of resources to create. It dwarfed the other arcs and was riddled with weapons. Its construction began after the War of Black Dawn, approximately in the early 22nd millennia, and finished just before the start of the 31st millennia. Immediately after Malorn was finished, Great Arc Silma began construction, and the finishing touches were just being implemented. The Keepers kept these ships out of combat. Putting them in danger was too risky. If they lost one, it would be a devastating blow to the entire civilization. The warship docked to the spaceport above the planet. From there, the civilians, including myself, were ushered off. The Eldar in the intricate armor who put me aboard the transport stepped onto a platform overlooking the survivors. He told us he was Battle Lord Turgon, and that we had a choice. Those who wished to live the life of a civilian, to continue, as best they could, the life they had on the colony, could do so by going into the left room. Those who wanted to protect their people, to join the military, should go to the right. My homeworld's populace was either extremely religious and thus xenophobic, or too jaded from seeing other conflicts to care. Everyone, including my sister, went to the left. In truth, I was surprised that the other more fanatical parts of my homeworld didn't attack or start trouble. I guess the vast army doing their duties in the hangar dissuaded them. I asked Battlelord Turgon, while everyone was going to the left, if I would be separated from my sister if I walked a different path than her. He reassured me that that would not be the case. A part of me wanted to avoid war, to live a life of peace like my father wanted, but the other part of me wanted to stand with the people who saved my sister and myself. In all honesty, it was a feeling I couldn't and still can't quite explain. It was a calling. I guess that's really the only way I can describe it. I walked the right path alone, and I could feel my sister's glare. The first few months of training focused on giving the recruits an education. We learned a lot of different things, not all of which were about fighting alone. The Keepers believed a sharp mind was just as important as a sharp blade. We were encouraged to build bonds with our fellow recruits, to in essence become brothers and sisters. Most of the recruits in my section were Xenos, and the few humans there had been born in Keeper space. This led me to being a bit distant. I just minded my own business. I may not have been as xenophobic as the rest of the colony, but I would be lying if I said that their attitudes didn't rub off on me. At one point, I got into a fight with another recruit, a Tau from the Firecast, or the very least, the Firecast portion of the species. I don't recall what it was about, but I do remember he threw the first punch, which was a mistake. From the years of working on a farm and the wide variety of exercises I did with my father, I was incredibly strong. The Tau was quick and perceptive, but the moment I got my hands on him, it was over. I tackled him to the ground and just kept wailing on his face. One of the Eldar instructors broke us up. At the time, I didn't know it, but that fight was the beginning of a long friendship. As our schooling was slowly replaced with drill and training, both myself and the Tau, Keen Eye, or Black Eye, as I called him, were assigned as partners. Whatever one did affected the other. I would later learn that Battlelord Turgon ordered this. We were both loners who were whisked away from our homeworld. We both needed a brother. While in school, a concept the Keepers referred to as the common good was talked about at length. Black Eye stated it was similar to the greater good, a Tau concept, but our Eldar instructor disagreed. She went on to explain that the difference between the two comes down to execution. For the Tau, brainwashing and sterilization, as well as the rigid caste system, were all in place to ensure the civilization wouldn't collapse as it is. Horrid actions were done to protect the status quo. They were done for the greater good. The common good, on the other hand, referred to horrid actions that had to be done to protect the greatest number of people. The example the instructor gave us was executing those who worshipped chaos in Keeper space. If enough people started worshipping chaos in Keeper space, then the forces of chaos may find them, resulting in a probable attack, or even destruction of everything the Keepers built. They killed hundreds to ensure the safety of trillions. She then explained that the law system for the Keeper space followed an archaic doctrine because of the concept of the common good. In short, the law system was an eye for an eye. What you do to others will be inflicted upon you. Naturally, there is more nuance to this, but for most issues, this was how things were done. For some cases, this may seem extreme, but the Keepers wanted things to be simple. Within their space lied many different religions, beliefs, cultures, and alien races. Outside of worshipping chaos, they could do whatever they wanted within the bounds of the law, but if they broke it, then the punishment would be swift. Now make no mistake, the Keepers didn't do this out of a sense of idealism. They did it out of pragmatism. The Keepers had no intention of staying in the galaxy. Much like the Eldar, the galaxy was dying a slow death. The Keepers were founded by the people they call the Four Lords of the Eldar. Essentially, they are Eldar who saw the collapse of their civilization and take responsibility for creating Slaanesh. The Four Lords, Battlelord Turgon, Inklord Tur, Cyberlord Gelwyn, and Mindlord Sendril, were able to create the Veil, and in the process, extend their lives well beyond that of even the most long-lived Eldar. To the populace, the details about these events aren't widely known. I myself may know them now, but, well, the subject is long and complicated, and it's something to talk about another time. These four and their followers saw what the Eldar had become, and, long story short, they believed the galaxy's salvation was the younger races. Their civilization ruled the galaxy, and they screwed up so bad they fell apart, and they created a chaos god. Their time had passed. However, time progressed and things got worse and worse. After the War of Black Dawn, a war Battlelord Turgon knows much more about, the Keepers shifted their focus from rebuilding the galaxy to fleeing. They began a plan to collect as much genetic information as well as live specimens from every planet, so when the galaxy was beyond saving, they would flee to another to start again. And one day, if they were strong enough, return to the galaxy and challenge the darker forces that still existed. And that is where their tolerant view stems from. They don't let the younger races believe what they want because it's the right thing to do. They do it because stopping them would cause more trouble than it's worth. However, that isn't to say they don't try to alter what the other species believe. For the Tau, the Keepers are able to slightly alter the concept of the greater good to match that of the common good. By helping us, you ensure your species will survive if your empire crumbles. For humanity, the idea of purging every Xeno and heretic is altered. The Keepers want to help humanity. Unlike every other Xeno race, your teachings don't refer to us. Besides, we kill chaos heretics just like you. In a way, this was the truth, but it was a stretch. With that said, there is an odd split within the human faith. According to Inklord Tur, during the 31st millennia, there was a massive exodus of humans, fleeing the conflict later known as the Horus Heresy. With them came the Emperor's more secular teachings. This more secular faith would later be called the Emperor's Path, but at the time, it was simply referred to as the human religion, or the human belief. Both human faiths, the Imperial cult and the Emperor's Path, both believe that they have the true word of the Emperor. Violence has been deterred due to harsh repercussions that will arise if tensions escalate. However, when dealing with fanatics, the threat of punishment won't always stop them. When I was just about to finish my training and become a full-time member of the Keeper military, Battlelord Turgon asked to see me. He asked if I had kept in contact with my sister. I told him I had, though our relationship was strained. She was disgusted by the fact I would willingly fight for Xenos, let alone befriend them. The fact that she put it in that order always perplexed me. By the look on his face, I think he understood, which made what he was asking me a difficult thing to do. He told me that there had been rising tensions between the two human faiths, and that there had been a murder. The killer was caught, and he was a member of the chapel that my sister worked for. He asked me to go there, and get close to my sister and report back anything that could lead to further violence. I was hesitant, but accepted. If I could stop the fanatics at the chapel, then, at least I believed, I could prevent my sister from being punished. At the time, the idea that my sister could be a fanatic never really crossed my mind. We may have had our differences, but she was still my sister. For several months, I attended service at the chapel, and over time I found myself going from praying half-heartedly to actually praying. I didn't believe the Emperor was a god, but rather a figure every human should aspire to. In spite of this, I was still praying to something, though I couldn't find a name. Many years later, much later, I found myself praying to the Eldar god Isha. After everything that had happened to me, I needed something, someone to put my faith in. Even if she didn't exist, even if she was an Eldar god, I still prayed to her. In time, my sister and I actually began to bond, but her intolerance towards Xenos and other beliefs, it was just all too apparent. I just avoided talking about those subjects around her. However, as time passed, she started to get more mysterious. I realized she was obviously hiding something from me, but she wouldn't let on to what it was. In a bid to find out what this was, I set something up with Black Eye. He would come to the chapel, remain outside of course, I didn't want him to get killed, and begin mocking the faith when my sister was around. He drew a lot of attention from the faithful that day, but they didn't do anything. Knowingly attacking a soldier could lead to a death sentence. Like I said before, there is more nuance to this, but for most cases, that would be the result. With this in mind though, this repercussion wouldn't be true for me. I approached Black Eye and we played off of one another. Then we threw punches. It was a real fight, but we treated it as a sparring match. There were no hard feelings surrounding it, just a lot of bruises and cuts. I ended up beating him and told him to get out of my sight. If I ever saw him again, I would kill him. Like I said before, there was no hard feelings, it was all a ruse. Thankfully though, this plan worked, and my sister invited me to join her and her colleagues later that night deep below the chapel. For years, the fanatics at the chapel had planned a mass assault on the other places of worship. To them, they were all heretics and needed to be purged, and they were going to do it that night. Coincidences aside, I ran back to Battlelord Turgon and told him the news. Before he leaped into action, I did ask if he could spare my sister. Just lock her up and don't kill her. He told me that he would see what he could do, and I didn't detect any deception in his voice. My sister had wanted me to join her in attacking the Emperor's path, the faith whose member was murdered, resulting in my investigation. With Battlelord Turgon and his soldiers following me, we descended upon my sister and the other fanatics. The soldiers gunned down the fanatics who tried to oppose us, but my sister was left unharmed. But she did take a hostage, resulting in Battlelord Turgon ordering his soldiers to lower their weapons, in order that I must have missed, because I was the only person with my weapon still raised, and it was trained on my sister's slightly exposed head. I begged her to drop the gun. I told her she wouldn't be harmed, but nothing sunk through. She said I betrayed her, that I betrayed humanity, and that I was worse than the heretic whose head was pressed against her gun. I pleaded, "Please, Veronica, don't do this. What would Mom and Dad think? What you're doing is pointless." She gave a smirk and pulled the trigger, telling me they would think she did the right thing. Battlelord Turgon told his men to keep their weapons down. He passed a glance at me. I told her she was wrong. Father would have never done something so heartless without a real reason to do so, not based off of superstition or faith. She tried to respond, but I pulled the trigger before she could. Her limp corpse fell to the ground, dead. Black Eye was there in the chapel, and he tried to show some sort of support, but Battlelord Turgon stopped him, stating that I had done my duty. I did what I was supposed to. A few days passed, and I still couldn't believe what I did. I killed my sister. Eventually, Battlelord Turgon asked me to see him. I didn't know what to expect, but when I walked in, he was holding my father's lasgun. He told me he understood that what I'd done was a hard thing to do. He himself had been in a similar situation. He told me to remember the good times, to remember the people as they used to be, to remember that in the darkness of the 41st millennium, there are still good people trying to do the right thing, like my father. With those words of advice, he handed me my father's lasgun and offered me a place in his personal squad, an honor the likes of which cannot be overstated. I did accept, but before leaving the room, I brought up Black Eye, stating Battlelord Turgon's own words that he said many years ago. Whatever one did affected the other. Essentially, I asked if he would also be joining the squad. Battlelord Turgon grinned, for a moment, and nodded. To say killing my sister was the easiest decision I had ever made would be a lie. But in the coming years, the trials and tribulations, the choices I would make, well, it would be one of the easier ones. At the time, I didn't fully understand what the common good was. Over the years, this would change, but the choice I made with my sister helped in my understanding. She killed one of the Path's leading members. If I arrested her, if she was never killed, then the repercussions would have been great. The Emperor's Path would have tried to see her punished, and over time, if nothing happened, they may have done something extreme, leading to several deaths. Or perhaps she would have escaped custody and organized another attack such as this. If she was left alive, she would have been a greater threat than she was worth. I killed one to save, possibly, 1,000. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it all made sense. I hope you, at least with the next few episodes of this, I hope you understand the direction I'm taking this. For those of you who've just stumbled across this, hello, I'm Boofire. I do stuff. But I also kind of want to briefly explain the philosophy behind this. There is a video kind of talking about this a bit more in depth, but in short, the way I'm going about this is the Eldar are a species I find to be cool, but oh my god, have they been shit on consistently. They haven't really had awesome moments, which I'm trying to redirect with this. However, the Eldar are based off of, and the High Elves in Warhammer, are based off of the Elves in Tolkien, but their negative aspects are upplayed, while their positives are really, really, really downplayed. And I guess I'm trying to counteract that with this. A few of you may have caught it. A lot of the names are based off of names from Lord of the Rings or slight modifications. I'm mostly doing this because oh my god, I do not know names. I am very bad at creating names. So I'm using that as inspiration. And beyond that, I'm trying to have this be a bit more optimistic. So I guess the way I'm going about it is the reason why the Imperium and the Tau do terrible things to their people is because they're trying to keep an empire afloat. And they have a lot of power, where this group, they're doing, basically they can keep their civilization together because their civilization is more of a temporary thing. They're separated from chaos. They're separated from the wider galaxy. They don't have to deal with those threats. And in a weird way, they're a microcosm of the wider galaxy. But beyond that, I really wanted a story where you have a good faction. You have good people trying to do the right thing. However, they are so weak in comparison to the rest of the galaxy that whatever good they do is completely offset by the fact that somewhere else in the galaxy, something else that is terrible is happening. They have the power to respond to a situation, one given situation, but they do not have the power to shape the galaxy. They do not have the power to change the galaxy. There's a small glimmer of hope, and that's about it. I hope, though, with like the law system and some of the other things I'm trying to introduce, I'm not trying to make them fucking Mary Sues. The moment they start going that route, I really hope you guys do in the comments tell me so. And hopefully explain it without being complete dickheads about it. Like, call me a fucking retard, idiot, fuckhead. Basically, any comment that I received from Earth and Star Wars, I'm hoping I don't get that this time around. If there's a problem with it, tell me, because believe it or not, a lot of the things I do tends to stem from feedback I get. I have a few different things, but if I start seeing the same thing over and over again, I'll alter my story. But I'm not going to do things for the sake of doing them. Like, they're not going to be evil for the sake of being evil. Whenever they do something terrible, there's a damn good reason behind it. But yeah, so just a little bit of a ramble and clarification. I hope you guys enjoy this story. Tell me what you thought. My voice is fucked right now. Oh god, my throat hurts. But yeah, so I've been Boofar 1-on-1. I hope I see you guys next time. Goodbye.